The wind screamed across the frozen land. It was not the sound of a gentle breeze, but the roar of a monster. The sky was dark, filled with heavy clouds that swallowed every trace of light. Snow and ice fell like sharp knives, cutting into the skin of anyone foolish enough to walk outside. This was not an ordinary storm. This was the kind of storm that ended lives. The people of the alien city hid behind their walls. They locked their doors, sealed their windows, and prayed that the storm would pass quickly. No one wanted to be caught outside. Everyone knew the rule: when the ice storm comes, you hide or you die. But one woman had no choice. She held her small child close to her chest, wrapping him in every blanket she owned. The child's skin was pale, his breath weak. He needed medicine. Without it, he would not survive the night. But the medicine was not in their home. It was far away, across the frozen street, inside a small storage unit at the edge of the settlement. Her heart pounded. Fear told her to stay. Hope told her to move. And so she stepped out into the storm. The wind struck her like a hammer. Her legs shook as she pushed forward. Every step felt heavier than the last. Ice clung to her hair, her eyelashes, her clothes. The snow was so thick she could not see more than a few feet ahead. Still, she kept going. Her child whimpered in her arms, his small body shaking from the cold. She whispered to him, "Hold on. Please, just hold on." Around her, the storm was alive. The ice cracked, the ground shook, and the air howled like angry spirits. She had lived through many storms before, but this one felt different, stronger, crueler. She knew she could not last long. The storage unit seemed farther away than ever, as if the storm itself wanted to keep her from reaching it. And worse, she was not alone. Through the snow, she saw shadows moving, tall, thin shapes sliding across the ice with unnatural speed. Hunters, creatures that waited for storms like this one, when their prey was weak and lost. Their glowing eyes blinked in the distance, watching her, waiting for her to fall. Her chest tightened. She could not fight them. She could barely even stand. But she could not stop now. Her feet slipped on the frozen ground. She fell to her knees, clutching the child tightly so he would not touch the ice. The cold bit into her bones. Her vision blurred. She wanted to cry, but the tears would only freeze on her face. She thought, "This is the end. No one will help me." No one ever does. Then, through the storm, a figure appeared. At first she thought it was another hunter. A tall shape walking slowly through the blizzard, pushing against the screaming wind. But no, this was different. The figure moved with strength, not with hunger. It was a man. Not one of her kind. Not an alien. A human. She had seen humans before, but never like this. His body was wrapped in heavy armor, glowing faintly against the storm. His face was hidden behind a helmet, but she could feel his eyes on her. She could feel his presence, solid, unshaken, fearless. The hunters in the distance froze, as if they too sensed his strength. For the first time in her life, she felt that someone had stepped into the storm not to survive, but to protect. The man walked toward her with steady steps. The storm tried to push him back, but he would not bend. When he reached her, he crouched down, his voice firm but calm. "Give me the child." She hesitated. No one had ever helped her before. Her people only cared for themselves. Compassion was rare, almost unheard of. But this man, this stranger, was offering his life for her child. She saw no fear in him, only resolve. Slowly, she placed the child in his arms. The man wrapped the child inside his armored coat, shielding him from the storm. Then he turned his head toward the glowing eyes in the distance. The hunters growled, their shapes moving closer. The mother felt terror grip her heart. But the man stood tall, his body like a wall of steel against the storm. For a long moment, nothing happened. The storm howled. The hunters waited. The mother shivered in fear. And the man, silent and unmoving, held the child as if he had been born for this moment. The mother looked at him and thought, "Who is he? Why would he do this? Why would he risk everything for us?" And in her heart, for the first time, she felt a spark of something she had never known before: hope. The storm did not forgive. The wind struck like iron whips, and the sky poured ice without mercy. Yet through this endless storm, the man walked. His steps were slow but unshaken. Each movement looked like a battle, but he never stopped. His shadow cut through the blizzard like a knife of light. The mother watched him, her body shaking, her child weak in her arms. She could not understand. No one from her world would dare step into such death. But this man, this human, walked forward as if the storm itself had no power over him. When he reached her, he spoke only once. "Give him to me." His voice was strong, carried even through the roar of the wind. The mother froze. Her eyes darted to the hunters in the distance, those glowing eyes in the snow, waiting to strike. She looked back at the man. He was a stranger. He was not of her people. She had been told humans were dangerous, selfish, even cruel. But in this moment, standing in the storm, she saw something different in him. His hand reached forward. Steady, sure, unafraid. With trembling arms, she passed her child to him. The man pulled the child close, wrapping him under his armored coat. The heat from his body and his suit spread quickly. The boy let out a soft breath, warmer than before. Relief shone in the mother's eyes, though fear still clung to her heart. The man turned his head. His helmet glowed faintly, reflecting the storm. He looked at her for a moment, silent. Then he spoke again. "Stay behind me." And he moved. The hunters stirred. Long shapes slid over the ice, circling closer. Their bodies were thin, but powerful, their claws sharp enough to tear through metal. The mother's legs shook. She had seen these creatures before. Entire families had been lost to them during storms. They killed quickly, leaving nothing behind but frozen silence. But the man did not flinch. He adjusted the child in his arms, holding him firmly against his chest, and with his free hand, he pulled out a small device. It was not a gun, not a blade. It was something she had never seen, small, silver, glowing with light. The hunters stopped, as if they recognized the danger in his hand. Their glowing eyes blinked. Uneasy, the man pressed the device. A sudden burst of heat and light exploded into the storm. The snow hissed, the air cracked, and the hunters pulled back with angry screeches. For the first time, the storm was not the master of this land. For the first time, the mother felt the storm hesitate. They began to move. The man stepped forward, slow but steady, cutting a path through the blizzard. The mother followed close behind, shielding her face from the flying ice. Each step felt like a miracle. The hunters prowled at the edges, but they did not attack. Not yet. The child stirred in the man's arms. His small voice whispered through cracked lips, "Mama?" The mother's heart ached. She reached out, touched her child's hand, and felt warmth returning. Tears filled her eyes. She looked at the man again. His face was still hidden behind his helmet. But she could see the strength in his movements, the purpose in his stride. He did not speak often, but when he did, his words carried weight. "You must not stop. If you fall, they will come." She nodded, forcing her legs to keep moving. The storm screamed louder, almost as if it was angry at being defied. Ice shards fell from the sky, smashing into the ground like spears. One piece cut across the man's shoulder, tearing his armor. He staggered but did not drop the child. Instead, he shifted his body, using himself as a shield. The mother gasped. His blood dripped into the snow, dark against the white. But still, he did not stop. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this? You do not know us." For a moment, she thought he would not answer. Then, through the storm, his voice came quietly. "Because he is a child, and no child should die alone in the cold." The words struck her harder than the storm ever could. No one from her world had ever spoken with such truth. Compassion was not something she knew. It was something she had only heard about in old tales. Yet here, in the darkest of storms, a stranger from another world was showing it to her. The hunters grew restless. Their screeches echoed closer this time. They were testing him, testing his strength. The man stopped walking and stood tall. He shifted the child in one arm and raised the glowing device again. The light burst across the snow, brighter, hotter. The hunters hissed, pulling back but not leaving. They would wait. They always waited. The mother shivered, but now she looked not only with fear. She looked with wonder. Here, in the middle of the storm, stood a man who should not have cared. Yet he cared more than anyone she had ever known. And as the hunters circled, as the storm raged, and as her child clung to life in the arms of a stranger, she realized something she had never believed before. Maybe humans were not the monsters her people said they were. Maybe, just maybe, they were something more. The storm did not calm. It grew angrier, as if it understood that someone dared to resist it. The wind screamed louder, throwing walls of snow across the land. The ground was no longer solid. It cracked under layers of ice. Each step forward became a battle against a world that wanted them dead. The man carried the child close to his chest. The boy's breath was shallow, his tiny hands twitching in weakness. The mother walked just behind, her body shaking, her legs heavy. She wanted to give up, to sink into the snow and let the cold take her. But when she saw the man in front of her bleeding, staggering, yet never falling, she forced herself to keep moving. The hunters followed. Their glowing eyes blinked through the white blur, never too near, never too far. They moved like shadows across the snow, circling, waiting. They knew the storm was their ally. They knew prey always fell sooner or later. The mother whispered, "They are coming closer." Her voice was almost lost in the roar of the wind. The man did not turn his head. He answered simply, "Then we must go faster." But faster was almost impossible. The ground split open. A hidden crack in the ice spread wide, black and endless. The man stopped just in time, his boots sliding on the edge. If he had taken one more step, he and the child would have vanished into the dark abyss. The mother gasped, clutching her chest. The man looked left, then right. The storm had hidden the path. The way ahead was broken. He shifted his weight, searching for a crossing. Finally, he spotted a narrow bridge of ice, thin but strong enough if they moved carefully. He turned to the mother. "Stay close. Do not look down." The mother nodded, though fear twisted her stomach. She stepped onto the icy bridge, her body trembling. The wind howled, pushing her sideways. She cried out, arms flailing. The man reached out quickly, gripping her wrist with steel strength. With his other arm, he still held the child, never letting go. "Focus," he said, his voice sharp but steady. One step at a time, her heart pounded. Slowly, painfully, she crossed. The hunters screeched behind them, angry that their prey had not fallen. When they reached the other side, the storm threw another test. A sheet of ice broke loose from the sky, crashing down like a falling blade. The man twisted, shielding the child with his body. The impact knocked him to his knees. His shoulder armor cracked further, blood seeping into the snow. The mother rushed to his side. "You're hurt," she cried. He shook his head. The child is alive. That is what matters. She stared at him in shock. Never in her life had she seen someone care more for another than for themselves. His eyes, hidden behind his helmet, still burned with determination. He stood again, lifting the child higher against his chest. But the boy's body was limp now, his breathing shallow, weaker than before. The storm was draining the last of his strength. The mother's heart shattered. She reached for her child, her voice breaking. "Please, he cannot go on." The man crouched down and placed a small device on the snow. It glowed faintly, humming with energy. A warmth spread from it, fighting against the cold. He placed the child over it for a moment, wrapping him tighter in blankets. The boy stirred, a faint sound escaping his lips. The mother's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "You saved him." Again, the man did not answer. He only lifted the child once more and stood against the storm. The hunters grew impatient. Their shapes moved closer, their glowing eyes brighter. The storm made them fearless. The mother saw their claws glinting through the snow. Her legs trembled, her voice cracked. They will attack soon. The man did not look at them. His voice was calm. "Then let them. I will hold them off. You must keep walking." Her heart stopped. "No, you cannot fight them alone." He turned his head slightly toward her. For the first time, she saw his face as the wind lifted his helmet visor scarred, weathered but unbroken. His eyes burned with fire, not fear. "I am already fighting," he said. "Every step is a battle." But for him, he looked at the child. "I will fight until the end." The mother's breath caught. In that moment, she understood. This man was not here by accident. He had chosen this path, chosen to protect. The storm howled, the hunters shrieked, and the child lay between life and death. The mother stood torn between terror and awe. She had never seen courage like this. She had never seen compassion at all, and now, in the heart of the storm, she realized something powerful. If they survived this night, her world would never be the same again. The storm roared without mercy. But inside its furious voice came something new, an echo. A sound not made by the wind or by cracking ice. It was a low hiss, stretched and sharp, like the whisper of knives sliding together. The mother froze. Her heart pounded against her chest. She knew that sound. Every child in her colony grew up with warnings about it. She had prayed she would never hear it herself. But now, in the middle of this storm, the whispers were real. The hunters were no longer shadows. They were close. The man stopped walking. His boots pressed deep into the snow. He shifted the child in his arms, making sure the boy's face was hidden against his chest, shielded from the icy wind. Then he stood tall, turning his head slowly, scanning the white blur of the storm. At first, nothing was clear. Just snow, endless and blinding. Then the shapes appeared, slender bodies sliding across the ice, crawling low, moving with unnatural speed. Their skin blended with the snow, like ghosts born from the storm itself. The mother gripped her own arms tightly, her voice trembling. They will kill us." The man spoke without fear. "Only if we let them." The hunters circled. Their glowing eyes blinked, always watching. They made no rush to attack. That was their way. They liked to play with prey, to exhaust it before striking. The storm was their weapon, and fear was their feast. One of them hissed again, the sound crawling under the mother's skin. She wanted to scream, but her throat was frozen with terror. The man lowered the child carefully onto a patch of snow beside him, wrapping him tightly so the storm could not touch his skin. Then he straightened, one hand gripping the glowing device at his belt. The mother gasped. "What are you doing?" "Don't leave him." The man's voice was firm, unshaken. "I'm not leaving." I'm standing between them and him, and he did. His body became a wall. A hunter stepped closer, its body shifting like liquid shadow. Its limbs were too long, its movements too smooth. Its head tilted unnaturally, as if curious about the man. Then its jaws opened, showing rows of teeth like jagged glass. The mother stumbled back, her breath breaking. We cannot fight them. Not all of them. The man said nothing. Instead, he pressed the device. A burst of light exploded outward, bright against the storm. The hunter shrieked, pulling back, its skin smoking under the sudden heat. The others hissed in anger, their circle tightening. The mother stared in disbelief. She had never seen these creatures afraid before. But the man, this strange human, had something they feared. For a brief moment, hope touched her heart. The hunters tested him. One darted forward, so fast it was almost invisible. The man twisted, blocking with his arm. Its claws scraped across his armor, sparks flying. He shoved it back with brutal force, sending it skidding across the ice. Another leaped from the side. The man spun, light flashing again, searing the creature's pale skin. It screeched and fled into the storm. But the circle did not break. More eyes appeared in the dark. More shapes slithered closer. The storm was thick with them now. The mother whispered, almost to herself, "There are too many." The man's chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Then we hold on. One moment at a time, the hunters began to chant. Not words, but sounds deep, inhuman cries that shook the air. They stomped claws against the ice in a rhythm, a circle of death closing in. The storm seemed to move with them, its winds shifting like a drumbeat to their song. The mother covered her ears, but the sound crawled inside her mind. She dropped to her knees, shaking. I cannot. I cannot. The man stepped in front of her, his stance firm. He raised the device high. Its glow cut through the storm, brighter this time, almost alive. The hunters paused, uncertain. For the first time, the man spoke not in calm, but in fire. Stay back. The sound of his voice was not a request. It was a command. Even the storm seemed to hesitate, but hesitation was not surrender. From the white blur came the largest of them, taller, stronger, its eyes glowing brighter than the rest. It stepped forward, its breath freezing the air in jagged crystals. The other hunters fell silent, as if bowing to their leader. The mother's heart sank. No, not this one. Please, no. The man turned his head slightly, just enough for his voice to reach her. What is it? Her lips trembled. The Storm Lord. The one who leads them. No one survives when it comes. The man gripped his device tighter. Then no one has tried hard enough. The creature roared, the sound breaking across the storm like thunder. Its claws slammed into the ice, sending cracks racing toward them. The ground shook under their feet. The man did not move back. He shifted the child once more into the shelter of his body, then stepped forward. His blood dripped onto the snow, steam rising as it met the cold. The mother watched, frozen between terror and awe. In her life, she had seen warriors, fighters, and killers. But she had never seen someone like this. A stranger, bleeding, broken, standing against death itself, not for himself, but for her child. The hunters hissed in chorus. The storm screamed. The Storm Lord crouched, ready to strike, and the man raised his light. The battle was about to begin. The Storm Lord crouched low, its body half hidden by the storm. Yet its presence crushed the air like a mountain pressing down. Its glowing eyes locked on the man, bright and merciless. The smaller hunters hissed and swayed, waiting for their master's signal. The mother clutched her chest, her knees weak. She wanted to close her eyes, to hide from what was coming, but she could not. Something inside her forced her to watch. She had to see what this human would do. The man stood tall. His coat whipped in the wind, torn and heavy with snow. His armor was cracked, blood seeping down his side. Yet he did not bend. The child was strapped safely to his chest, wrapped in layers of heat and cloth. The man's free hand held the glowing device, its light burning brighter against the darkness. He whispered only once, "Stay behind me." Then the Stormlord moved. It struck with speed that defied its size. One moment it crouched, the next it lunged, claws slicing through the air. The man spun, light flashing, forcing the beast back. The ground shook as its claws slammed into the ice, sending shards flying. The mother cried out, shielding her face, but the man did not waver. He moved like a soldier who had faced death before and refused to bow. Every motion was sharp, efficient, practiced. The Stormlord roared, a sound that rattled bones. Smaller hunters screeched in response, their voices echoing through the storm like a chorus of nightmares. They darted forward, slashing, testing. The man struck with light, each burst driving them back. But every attack cost him. His breaths grew heavier, his stance slower. Still, he stood. One hunter broke through. It rushed from behind, its claws reaching for the child. The mother screamed, but before the cry left her lips, the man twisted his whole body, shielding the boy. The claws raked across his back. Blood splattered the snow. He grunted in pain, but his grip on the child never loosened. The mother's hands shook. She wanted to run to him to help, but her legs refused to move. She had never seen such courage. She had never seen someone give everything for another's child. The Stormlord hissed again, angrier now. It lunged once more, its claws glowing with frozen light. The man raised his device and unleashed a blast brighter than fire. The light tore across the storm, burning into the beast's chest. The Stormlord shrieked, staggering back. The smaller hunters scattered for a moment, their circle breaking. For a heartbeat, silence touched the storm. The man dropped to one knee, breathing hard. The mother rushed forward, her voice desperate. "You cannot keep fighting them. You will die." He looked up at her, his face pale, his lips tight with pain. Yet his eyes burned like fire. "If I fall," he said, "then you must run. Take him and run." She shook her head violently, tears freezing on her cheeks. "No, I cannot. I cannot do this without you." He held her gaze, steady even in the chaos. "You can. Because now you know the truth. Compassion is stronger than fear." The words struck her deeper than the storm's cold. She wanted to argue, but she could not, because she believed him. The silence ended. The Stormlord roared again, its voice like thunder breaking mountains. It charged, the ground trembling beneath its weight. The man pushed himself to his feet, blood dripping down his armor. He braced himself, legs spread, ready for the final strike. The beast collided with him. Claws slashed, teeth snapped. Light and shadow clashed in the storm. Sparks flew as steel met ice. The man shouted with effort, his voice breaking the howl of the wind. The mother screamed as she saw the beast's claws pierce his side. But the man did not fall. Instead, with one last surge of strength, he pressed his device directly into the Stormlord's chest. The light exploded. The beast shrieked, louder than the storm itself, its body thrashing wildly. The smaller hunters fled into the blizzard, their courage broken. The ground cracked, ice splitting under the force of the blast. The mother threw herself over her child, shielding him as the world shook, and then silence, when she dared to look up. She saw the Stormlord staggering, its chest burning with searing light. It let out one final roar before collapsing into the snow, its massive body shaking the ground. The glow in its eyes flickered once, then died. The storm was not gone, but it felt weaker now, as if part of its power had died with the beast. The man stood over the fallen creature, his chest heaving. He swayed, blood dripping freely, his strength nearly gone. Yet he looked at the child first, not himself. He bent down, checking the boy's breath, his small chest rising and falling softly. The boy still lived. Only then did the man stumble back, his knees giving way. The mother rushed to his side, grabbing his arm, her voice breaking. "Stay with us, please." He looked at her through heavy eyes, his words soft but fierce. "As long as he breathes, I will not stop." The storm howled around them, the hunters still lurking in the distance. The battle was not finished, but one truth was clear. Man had stood against death itself, and he had not fallen. The Storm Lord lay broken in the snow, its glowing eyes dark, its breath gone. The smaller hunters had fled into the blizzard, their courage shattered by the light. For a moment, silence stretched across the frozen land. But silence in the storm never lasted. The wind howled again, fiercer, as if the storm itself was furious at losing its champion. The sky cracked with thunder, and ice shards fell like spears. The blizzard thickened, hiding the land in a curtain of white. The mother's hands trembled as she helped the man to his feet. His blood stained her gloves, warm even against the bitter cold. His armor hung in pieces, broken by claws and teeth. Yet he still clutched the child close, his grip steady even as his body shook. "You cannot carry him any more," she cried, her voice sharp with desperation. "You will die if you keep this up." The man's breathing was heavy, each inhale ragged, but his eyes glowed with the same fire as before. He shook his head. "No, he stays with me." She wanted to argue, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw something unbreakable. This was not stubbornness, was devotion. Still, she pressed against his side, lending her strength to his failing steps. Together, they moved through the storm. The ground stretched endless before them. The path was gone, buried under snow. Every direction looked the same, a blur of white and shadow. The mother's heart twisted. They were lost. But the man did not waver. He pressed forward as if guided by something greater than sight. His boots cracked ice, his body bent under pain, but he never slowed, at last, through the storm. The mother spotted a dark shape, a cliff of ice, tall and jagged, with cracks running deep. Hope lit in her chest. She remembered old maps of the land. Beneath cliffs like these, there were caves, natural shelters carved by centuries of storms. There, she shouted over the roar of the wind, "We must reach the cliffs." The man lifted his head, his eyes focusing. He nodded once, and they turned toward it. The storm resisted. Wind pushed harder, snow blinded them, and ice broke beneath their feet. Twice the mother fell, scraping her hands bloody against the frozen ground. Twice the man pulled her up, his grip iron despite his weakness. The child whimpered faintly against his chest, a sound so small yet filled with life. The man whispered to him softly, words lost to the storm but heavy with care. The hunters had not vanished. Their eyes flashed at the edges of the blizzard, distant but watching. They had lost their leader, but hunger still burned in their bellies. They followed, patient as shadows. The mother's fear grew sharper with every step. She could feel them trailing, waiting for weakness, waiting for the moment when the man's strength finally broke. "Why do they wait?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The man answered through gritted teeth, "Because they know. Storms finish what they cannot." At last, they reached the cliff. The ice wall towered above them, tall as a fortress. Cracks split its surface, leading into darkness. The mother's heart pounded. If they could find a cave, they might survive the night. But as they drew close, the hunters moved. Their patience had ended. Shapes slid out of the storm, faster, sharper. Claws scraped the ice, glowing eyes flared. The circle was back, tighter this time, no longer waiting. The mother gasped, clutching the man's arm. "They're coming." The man staggered, blood dripping into the snow. He raised the glowing device one last time. Its light flickered weakly, drained from battle. His voice was low, broken, but steady. "Get him to shelter." "I'll hold them," her breath caught. She shook her head fiercely. "No. You cannot stand alone again. Not this time." For the first time, she stepped in front of him. Her legs shook, her body weak, but her eyes blazed. "If you fall, then I fall too. But I will not leave you to face this storm alone." The man looked at her, silent for a moment. Then, through the cracks in his pain, he gave the smallest nod together. They turned toward the hunters. The creatures hissed, circling, ready to strike. The man lifted the device, its glow dim but alive. The mother picked up a shard of ice, jagged like a blade, her hands trembling but firm. The child stirred faintly, his breath soft but present. The hunters lunged. The man roared, the sound tearing through the storm. Light burst once more, blinding, searing. The mother swung her ice blade, striking one across its face. It shrieked, falling back into the snow, step by step. They forced their way to the cliff, fighting not for victory, but for survival. Blood mixed with snow, screams cut through wind, and hope burned brighter than fear. At last, dark gap appeared in the cliff wall, a cave, narrow but deep. The cave was dark, carved from ice and stone, yet for the first time since the storm began, there was shelter. The wind screamed outside, furious that its prey had escaped. The hunters circled beyond the walls, their claws scraping, their eyes glowing in the storm. But they did not enter. The light of the man's device still burned faintly, keeping them at bay. Inside, silence returned fragile. Uncertain, the mother pressed her child close, listening for his breath, slow, weak, but steady. Tears filled her eyes. He was alive. Against all odds, he still lived. She turned her gaze to the man lying on the frozen ground. His armor was torn, his body broken. Blood stained the cave floor beneath him. She crawled to his side, her hands shaking as she tried to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, do not leave us now." The man opened his eyes. They were tired, heavy, yet still filled with that same fire she had seen in the storm. His lips curled faintly, almost a smile. "He's breathing," he whispered. "That's enough." The mother shook her head violently. "No, it is not enough. You saved him. You saved both of us. Now I must save you." She tore pieces from her own clothes, binding his wounds. She pressed snow against the bleeding, her hands clumsy but desperate. She had never cared for anyone like this before. She had never been taught compassion. But tonight, she lived it. Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside the cave, time slowed. The child slept in warmth, his breath growing stronger. The mother kept watch, glancing at the cave entrance where Hunter's eyes blinked in the dark. Each time they drew close, the man shifted, raising the device, its glow chasing them back. Even broken, even bleeding, he still stood guard. The mother's chest ached. She could not understand him. Why would a stranger suffer so much for them? Why would a man from another world give his life for a child that was not his? At last, she asked the question that had burned in her heart since the storm began. Why? Why do you fight for us? The man turned his head slightly, his breath shallow, his voice soft but clear. Because life, all life, matters. A child should know warmth, not death. A mother should know hope, not despair. His words sank into her soul. They were simple, yet they broke chains she had carried all her life. Her people had told her that compassion was weakness, that survival meant standing alone. But this man, this human, had shown her the opposite. Compassion was not weakness, was strength greater than the storm. The hours dragged on. At last, the storm began to break. The wind softened. The snow fell lighter. The hunters hissed in frustration, their eyes blinking one final time before vanishing into the fading blizzard. The silence that followed was not fragile this time. It was true. Morning light touched the ice walls of the cave, faint and golden. The world outside was still frozen, but it was no longer a prison. It was alive again, survivable. The mother lifted her child, pressing him close, warmth returning to his small body. Then she turned to the man. He was pale, his eyes closed, his breath faint but steady. She touched his hand gently. "The storm has ended. You saved us." His lips moved, barely a whisper. "Good then. My fight was worth it." Tears blurred her vision. She bowed her head, pressing his hand against her forehead. For the first time in her life, she whispered words she had never believed in before. "Thank you." When they left the cave, the land was quiet. Snow stretched endless across the horizon, glittering under the weak sun. The storm had passed, but its scars remained. And yet, in her heart, something had changed forever. She carried her child in her arms. The man walked beside her, weak but unbroken, his every step a victory. Together, they returned to her people. When the colony gates opened, her people stared in shock. They had thought she was lost. They had expected only silence. But she returned with her child alive and with a human at her side. Whispers spread. Quickly, fear, curiosity, suspicion. No one spoke aloud. But all eyes were fixed on the stranger. The mother raised her voice, trembling but strong. "He saved us. He saved my child when none of you would. He faced the storm and the hunters alone. He fought not for himself, but for compassion." Her words rippled through the crowd like fire through dry grass. Some turned away in doubt, others leaned closer in wonder. No one had ever spoken of compassion as strength. No one had ever seen it proven with such sacrifice. That night, as the settlement lit its fires against the fading cold, the story spread. The story of a man who stood against the storm. A man who bled for a child not his own. A man who showed that humans carried not only strength, but something greater heart. The mother held her child close and whispered to him as he slept, "You will grow, you will live, and you will remember." Not just the storm, not just the fear. You will remember the man who saved you. You will remember what compassion means. She looked to the stars, her voice steady, carrying her vow into the night. "And I will tell our people. I will tell the world that humans fight not only with power, but with compassion." The storm had ended, but its legacy remained carved into her soul, carried by her child, and spread by her voice. The legend of the brave man would not die. It had only begun.